I'm Natalie.
I'm 32 years old, and I used to believe that marriage was supposed to feel like coming home. That's what everyone told me when I married Ryan 5 years ago in that beautiful ceremony at the Portland Rose Garden. His mother, Patricia, had insisted on the venue. She'd insisted on a lot of things, actually, but back then I thought it was just motherly love. I thought she wanted the best for her son, for us.
I was so fucking naive.
Before we dive into how spectacularly wrong I was about everything, do me a favor. If you're watching this, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe with notifications on. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this plays out. My name is Natalie Chin Harrison. I'm a graphic designer working remotely for a tech startup in Seattle, though Ryan and I live in Portland. We have a 2-bedroom craftsman bungalow in the Hawthorne district, the kind of place that looks perfect in Instagram photos with its restored hardwood floors and the Japanese maple in the front yard that turns brilliant red every October. I spend my mornings with coffee on the porch, my afternoons in client meetings over Zoom, and my evenings pretending that everything in my marriage is fine. It wasn't always pretending. When Ryan and I met 7 years ago at a mutual friend's brewery opening, I genuinely thought I'd found my person. He was an environmental engineer, passionate about sustainable urban development, funny in a self-deprecating way that felt authentic rather than performative. He had these green eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed, and he laughed a lot back then. On our third date, he took me kayaking on the Willamette River at sunset, and when we got caught in an unexpected summer rain, he didn't panic or complain. He just pulled me close and kissed me while the water streamed down our faces, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the person I want to build a life with. His mother approved of me immediately, which should have been my first red flag. Patricia Harrison is a force of nature. At 58, she runs a successful interior design firm in Lake Oswego, lives in a meticulously maintained mid-century modern house with views of the lake, and has never met a social situation she couldn't dominate. She's beautiful in that carefully maintained way that requires a personal trainer, a skilled esthetician, and a wardrobe budget that exceeds most people's rent. Her hair is always perfect, a shoulder-length blonde bob that probably costs more to maintain than my car payment. She speaks in this measured, melodious voice that somehow manages to sound both warm and condescending at the same time. When Ryan first introduced us, she took both my hands in hers, looked me directly in the eyes, and said, "Finally, someone who might actually be good enough for my boy." She'd laughed after she said it, so I laughed too, but something in her eyes hadn't been laughing at all. Ryan's father, Michael, had died when Ryan was 19. A sudden heart attack that left Patricia a widow at 43. Ryan was their only child, and in the year since Michael's death, Patricia had poured all her considerable energy and attention into her son. She called it devotion. I would later understand it as something much more toxic. But in those early days, I tried to see it as love. Patricia involved herself in every aspect of our wedding planning. She had opinions about my dress, too simple, the flowers, too traditional, the menu, too pedestrian. But she also wrote a check that covered a third of the wedding costs, and when she stood up during the reception to give her mother of the groom speech, she talked about how grateful she was to welcome me into the family, how she could finally rest easy knowing Ryan had found someone to take care of him. "I'm not losing a son," she'd said, her voice catching with emotion that seemed entirely genuine. "I'm gaining a daughter." I'd actually teared up. I'd hugged her afterward, feeling grateful and accepted and lucky to be marrying into a family where the mother-in-law didn't see me as competition but as an addition. Jesus Christ, I was an idiot. The first year of marriage was good. Better than good, actually. Ryan and I fell into an easy rhythm. He'd bike to his office downtown 3 days a week and work from home the other 2. I worked entirely remotely, which meant we had lunch together more often than not. We explored Portland's food scene, discovered new hiking trails in the gorge, hosted dinner parties for our friends. Patricia called frequently, maybe more frequently than I would have liked, but Ryan said that was just how she was, that she'd been alone since his father died, and he was all she had. "She means well," he'd say whenever I gently suggested that maybe we didn't need to have dinner at her house every Sunday. "It makes her happy to see us." Is that really so bad? And it wasn't bad, exactly. Just constant. Patricia always had an opinion about our choices. When we bought our house, she thought we were overpaying for the neighborhood. When I cut my hair shorter, she mentioned how much Ryan had always loved long hair on women. When we talked about waiting a few years before having kids, she'd bring up articles about fertility declining after 35, leaving them on Ryan's placemat during Sunday dinners like casual reading material. But I told myself these were small things. Annoying, sure, but not worth fighting about. Patricia had lost her husband young. Ryan was all she had. I could be patient. I could be understanding. The cracks started showing about 2 years in. It was subtle at first. Ryan started working later more often. Not dramatically later, just an extra hour here, a dinner meeting there. His phone, which used to sit casually on the coffee table while we watched Netflix, started living in his pocket. When it buzzed, he'd glance at it with this little flicker of something. Not quite guilt, but not quite innocence either, before deciding whether to respond. Just work stuff, he'd say, his fingers already moving across the screen. I didn't question it. Why would I? Ryan had never given me a reason not to trust him. He was a good husband, considerate, affectionate, reliable in all the ways that mattered. He remembered to pick up my favorite wine on his way home. He still kissed me goodbye every morning. He told me he loved me, and I believed him. But there were other things, small things, that started to accumulate like sediment at the bottom of a river. Patricia's calls became more frequent. Sometimes Ryan would take them in another room, his voice low and confidential. Once I walked into the kitchen while he was on the phone with her, and he immediately changed his tone, went brighter, more casual. Yeah, Mom, Natalie's right here. You want to talk to her? Patricia never wanted to talk to me. Sunday dinners at her house started to feel different too. Patricia would seat Ryan next to her, across from me, and their conversations would flow so easily, so naturally, that I'd find myself just watching them, feeling like an observer rather than a participant. They had inside jokes I didn't understand, references to people I'd never met, shared memories that predated me by decades. Remember when you and Jessica used to do that? Patricia said one evening, laughing at something Ryan had mentioned about his college years. Jessica. The name landed in the conversation like a stone in still water. Ryan's expression went carefully neutral. That was a long time ago, Mom. Oh, I know, sweetheart. I just think it's funny how some memories stick with you. She turned to me, her smile warm and inclusive. Jessica was Ryan's college girlfriend. They were together for almost 4 years. Such a sweet girl. We were kids, Ryan said quickly. It was never serious. Well, you certainly seemed serious about her at the time, Patricia countered, still smiling. But of course, that was before you met Natalie. Ancient history. The conversation moved on, but the name lingered. Jessica. For years. Ryan had never mentioned her, not in any detail. I knew he'd had relationships before me. I wasn't naive enough to think otherwise. But 4 years wasn't casual. 4 years was significant. That night, driving home, I asked him about her. There's nothing to tell, Ryan said, his eyes on the road. We dated in college. We broke up senior year. It was mutual, and it was fine. Your mom made it sound like it was more serious than that. My mom romanticizes everything. You know how she is. He reached over and squeezed my hand. Nat, that was over a decade ago. It has nothing to do with us. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him, mostly. But something about the way Patricia had brought Jessica up, casual but deliberate, like she was testing something, stayed with me. A few weeks later, I was at Patricia's house dropping off some design mock-ups she'd requested for her firm's website refresh. She'd offered to pay me for the work, insisting it would be a real project, not a family favor. I'd agreed partly because I could use the extra income, and partly because I thought it might be a good way to build a better relationship with her. I let myself in with the keys she'd given me. Family doesn't need to knock, darling. And called out to let her know I was there. No answer. I walked through the immaculate living room, past the dining room with its mid-century table that sat 8, toward the home office in the back, where she usually worked. That's when I heard her voice, low and animated, coming from the office. She was on the phone. Absolutely perfect, she was saying. Natalie will be in Seattle all day Wednesday for that client presentation. I'll tell Ryan you'll be at the house around 7. He thinks it's just a casual dinner, but you know what to wear.
My feet stopped moving.
Everything stopped moving. Jessica, sweetheart, I know this feels complicated, but Ryan deserves to be happy. Truly happy. And we both know he never quite got over you. A pause. No, she won't know. Why would she? I'm not trying to hurt anyone, honey. I'm trying to fix a mistake before it's too late. My hands were shaking. The folder of mock-ups slipped from my fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a slap that sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. Patricia appeared in the office doorway so quickly she must have ended the call mid-sentence. Her face was composed, pleasant, showing absolutely no sign of guilt or surprise. Natalie, I didn't hear you come in. Who were you talking to? A client. You know how demanding they can be. She smiled and bent to pick up my scattered papers. These look wonderful, by the way. Exactly what I was hoping for. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing through what I'd just heard. Jessica, Ryan's ex-girlfriend. Wednesday night. A setup. An ambush. What's happening Wednesday? I heard myself ask. Patricia's expression didn't change. Wednesday? Oh, I'm having a small dinner party. Nothing formal. Why do you ask? I thought I heard you mention. You must have misheard, sweetheart. These old houses carry sound in the strangest ways. She handed me back my folder, her manicured fingers cool against mine. Are you feeling all right? You look pale. I felt like I was losing my mind, like reality was tilting sideways and I couldn't find my footing. I'd heard what I'd heard. I knew what I'd heard, but Patricia's face was so calm, so genuinely concerned, that I started to doubt my own ears. I'm fine. I managed. Just tired. You work too hard. You should take better care of yourself. She guided me toward the door, with a gentle hand on my back. Ryan worries about you, you know. He mentioned just the other day that you've seemed stressed. Ryan and his mother talked about me. About my stress levels. About my well-being. Of course they did. They talked about everything. I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. When I got back to our house, I sat in the car for 20 minutes, staring at the Japanese maple in the front yard, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe it was a different Jessica. Maybe my paranoia about Patricia's involvement in our lives had finally tipped over into actual delusion. But I knew I hadn't misheard, and I knew exactly what I'd heard. Patricia was setting up my husband with his ex-girlfriend. She was orchestrating opportunities for them to be alone together. She was actively working to sabotage my marriage. The question was, why? And more importantly, what the fuck was I going to do about it? That night, Ryan came home around 7:30, later than usual. He kissed my cheek, smelling of coffee and something else. Perfume? No, probably just air freshener from someone's office. I was being paranoid. How was your day? He asked, heading to the fridge for a beer.
Fine.
I dropped off those mock-ups at your mom's. Oh, good. She's been excited about that project. He took a long drink, his back to me. She mention anything else? The question felt loaded. Or maybe I was reading into everything now. Like what? I don't know. She's been weird lately. Calling me at work about random stuff. He turned around, and his expression was open, honest, exactly like it always was. I think she might be lonely. Maybe we should make more of an effort to include her in things. My husband wanted to spend more time with his mother. The mother who was currently plotting to reunite him with his ex-girlfriend. The irony was so sharp I almost laughed. Sure, I said instead. Whatever you think is best. He smiled at me, grateful and relieved, and I felt something crack inside my chest. This man loved his mother. He trusted her completely. How could I tell him what I'd heard without sounding jealous or paranoid or crazy? How could I compete with the woman who'd raised him, who'd been his primary emotional support for over a decade, who knew exactly which buttons to push and which words to use to make him doubt me instead of her? I couldn't.
Not yet.
Not without proof. So I started watching. Waiting. Paying attention to all the small things I'd been too trusting, too busy, too fucking naive to notice before. Ryan's late nights became a pattern I could track. Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork. His phone was never face up anymore. Patricia's calls came at odd times. 8 in the morning when she knew I'd be in my morning meetings, 9 at night when she knew we'd be winding down for bed. She always asked for Ryan, never me. I started checking our credit card statements. There were charges I didn't recognize. Dinner at restaurants we'd never been to together. Coffee shops on the other side of town from his office. A florist delivery on a Tuesday afternoon, flowers I never received. Wednesday came. I'd told Ryan weeks ago that I had a client presentation in Seattle, that I'd be gone all day. I'd made sure to mention it in front of Patricia at our last Sunday dinner, watching her face carefully for any reaction. She just smiled and said how dedicated I was to my career, how lucky Ryan was to have such an ambitious wife. On Tuesday night, Ryan mentioned that his mother had invited him to dinner the next evening. It's just casual, but she's been wanting to catch up. You don't mind, do you? Since you'll be gone anyway? Of course not, I said, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Tell her I said hi. Wednesday morning, I kissed him goodbye like always. I got in my car like always. I drove towards Seattle like always. Except I didn't go to Seattle. I'd canceled the client meeting days ago, rescheduled it for the following week. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks from our house and waited. At 6:30, I drove back. I parked down the street where I could see our house, but where our house couldn't see me. I waited some more. At 7:15, a car I didn't recognize pulled into our driveway. A woman got out. She was beautiful in an understated way. Long dark hair, tasteful dress, the kind of effortless elegance that doesn't come effortlessly at all. She carried a bottle of wine and a small overnight bag. An overnight bag. She didn't knock. She used a key. My husband's ex-girlfriend had a key to my house. I sat in my car, watching the lights come on in our living room, watching shadows move behind the curtains. I should have stormed in there. I should have confronted them both. I should have done something, anything, other than sit there like a coward, watching my marriage implode in real time. But I didn't, because something in me understood, even then, that this wasn't just about Ryan's infidelity. This wasn't just about Jessica being in my house, probably in my bed with my husband. This was about Patricia. This was her design, her orchestration, her vision of how Ryan's life should look. And if I went in there screaming and crying and falling apart, I'd be playing exactly the role she'd cast me in, the hysterical wife, the obstacle, the mistake that needed to be corrected. So instead, I started my car, and I drove to a hotel near the airport. I checked in under my maiden name. I ordered room service I didn't eat, and I started planning. Because if Patricia Harrison wanted to play games with my marriage, with my life, with my future, then I was going to learn the rules. I was going to find her weaknesses. I was going to figure out exactly what she valued most in this world. And then I was going to take it away from her. Not with lawyers or divorce papers or dramatic confrontations. Nothing so simple, nothing so clean. Patricia dealt in manipulation and control, in whispered suggestions and carefully constructed appearances. I could learn to speak that language too. I just had to be willing to become someone I never thought I'd be. Someone patient and calculating and cold enough to win a war I'd never asked to fight. The question wasn't whether I could do it. The question was whether there'd be anything left of me, anything I recognized, anything worth saving, when it was over. I sat in that anonymous hotel room, staring at my reflection in the darkened window, and I made a choice. I chose war. And war, I was learning, required patience. It required planning. It required understanding your enemy better than they understood themselves. So the next morning, I drove home. I pulled into the driveway at exactly 9 a.m., the time I would have arrived if I'd actually driven back from Seattle. Jessica's car was gone. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, except for a wine glass in the sink that wasn't there before. Ryan was in the shower. I could hear the water running upstairs. I stood in the kitchen, staring at that wine glass, and I felt something settle inside me. Something hard and sharp and utterly certain. When Ryan came downstairs, his hair still damp, he kissed me good morning like everything was normal. "How was Seattle?" he asked. "Productive," I said, and I smiled at him. "How was dinner with your mom?"
Fine. You know how she is.
She talked my ear off about some new client. He poured coffee, completely at ease. "She asked about you, actually. Wanted to know if you were taking care of yourself." How sweet of her to worry. He didn't hear the edge in my voice. Or maybe he heard it and chose to ignore it. Either way, he just nodded and started talking about his schedule for the day, about a project deadline, about whether we needed to buy groceries. Normal. Everything was so devastatingly normal. That Sunday, we went to Patricia's for dinner, like always. She greeted us at the door like always, kissed Ryan's cheek, squeezed my hand with just a little too much pressure. Natalie, sweetheart, you look tired. Are you sleeping enough?
I'm sleeping fine, Patricia.
Thank you for asking. If you ever need anything, recommendations for a doctor, maybe something to help with stress, you know I'm here for you. She was offering me pills. Subtle, concerned, generous Patricia was offering me fucking sedatives, so I'd be too zonked out to notice what she was doing to my marriage.
He smiled her.
That's so kind of you. I'll keep that in mind. At dinner, I watched her with Ryan. I watched the way she touched his arm when she talked, the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she positioned herself between us whenever possible. I watched her mention Jessica's name twice. Casually, in passing, just enough to keep the other woman present in the conversation without making it obvious. And I started to see the pattern. The architecture of her manipulation. The careful way she'd been building this for months, maybe years. Making Ryan doubt his marriage without ever saying anything explicitly critical. Making him nostalgic for a past that probably never existed the way she described it. Making me into someone stressful and difficult and not quite good enough. She was rewriting our history in real time, and Ryan was letting her do it. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I went to Patricia's home office. I had maybe 3 minutes before someone noticed I was gone. Her computer was locked, but her file cabinet wasn't. I pulled out the top drawer as quietly as I could and started flipping through folders. Client files, financial records, nothing useful. The second drawer had personal correspondence. I found what I was looking for in a folder labeled simply Ryan. Letters.
Dozens of them.
From Jessica to Patricia, going back years. Some were from college, but others were recent. Very recent. I pulled out my phone and started photographing pages as fast as I could, my hands shaking. I still love him, one letter said. I never stopped. Was breaking up with him the biggest mistake of my life? Patricia's response, in her elegant handwriting. It's never too late to correct a mistake, sweetheart. Be patient. Trust me. Another exchange, from 6 months ago. Jessica, but he's married now. I can't do that to someone. Patricia, some marriages are meant to end. Some people are meant to be together. Ryan talks about you, you know. He wonders what might have been.
Lies.
Manipulation. Years of it. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I shoved the letters back in the folder, closed the drawer, and slipped out of the office, just as Patricia appeared around the corner. There you are. I was starting to worry you'd gotten lost. Her eyes flicked to the office door behind me, but her expression never changed. Feeling all right? Perfect, I said, and I meant it, because now I knew. Now I had proof, not just of Jessica, not just of Ryan's infidelity, but of Patricia's entire operation. Her letters, her manipulation, her years-long campaign to destroy my marriage and replace me with someone she'd chosen. I had evidence. I had time. And most importantly, I had a plan forming in my mind, something that would hurt her far more than any confrontation or divorce ever could. I was going to give Patricia exactly what she wanted, and then I was going to make sure she lived to regret it. We left Patricia's house that evening, Ryan's arm around my shoulders, talking about what a nice dinner it had been. I agreed with everything he said. I was pleasant and easy, and exactly the wife he thought he'd married. Because the best revenge, I was learning, wasn't loud or dramatic or satisfying in the moment. The best revenge was patient, strategic, invisible until it was too late to stop. Patricia Harrison had taught me that. Now I was going to teach her what happened when the student surpassed the master. The thing about discovering your life is built on someone else's manipulation is that you start seeing the blueprint everywhere. Once I knew what Patricia was doing, I couldn't unsee it. Every conversation we'd ever had, every suggestion she'd made, every concerned comment about my career or my appearance or my relationship with Ryan, it all rearranged itself in my mind like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too stupid to recognize. I spent the next 3 days acting completely normal while my brain worked overtime, analyzing years of interactions through this new, horrible lens. That Tuesday, I called in sick to work. Ryan kissed me goodbye, told me to rest, and headed to his office downtown. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, I got dressed and drove to the Portland State University library. If Patricia and Jessica had been corresponding for years, there had to be more. Digital footprints, social media interactions, something that would show me the full scope of what I was dealing with. I found a quiet corner in the research section and opened my laptop. Jessica's last name, I'd learned from one of those letters, was Chun. No relation to me despite the coincidence. She was white. Her ex-husband had been Chinese American. The divorce had been finalized 2 years ago, according to her Facebook profile, which was mostly private but still showed her basic information. She lived in Portland. She'd always lived in Portland, even during her marriage. She worked as a therapist. Ironic, given that she was helping my mother-in-law destroy my mental health at a private practice in the Pearl District. I scrolled through what little I could see of her profile. There were photos of her at what looked like art gallery openings, hiking in the gorge, having coffee with friends. She looked happy, well-adjusted, not like someone who was actively participating in the destruction of another woman's marriage. But then again, I'd looked happy in my photos too. I found her practice's website and spent an hour reading her bio, her approach to therapy, her specializations. Dr. Jessica Chun specializes in relationship counseling, trauma recovery, and life transitions, the website proclaimed. There is a photo of her in a tasteful office, looking compassionate and trustworthy. She helped people navigate difficult relationships while actively inserting herself into mine. The hypocrisy was almost impressive. I kept digging. Instagram, LinkedIn, anywhere I could find a digital trace of her. That's when I found it, a photo from 3 months ago. Jessica at a charity gala, standing next to Patricia. They were both dressed in evening gowns, wine glasses in hand, smiling at the camera. The caption read, "So grateful for mentors who believe in lifting other women up. Thank you, Patricia Harrison, for everything you do for the community." Mentors. Patricia was mentoring Ryan's ex-girlfriend. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was rage so pure and focused it felt like clarity. I screenshotted everything. Built a folder on my laptop labeled Home Renovation Ideas, where I stored every piece of evidence I found. Photos.
Dates.
Connections. The architecture of Patricia's manipulation was becoming clearer, and it was far more extensive than I'd initially realized. She hadn't just rekindled contact with Jessica recently. She'd maintained it for years. Through Jessica's marriage, through her divorce, through my entire relationship with Ryan. Patricia had been playing the long game, keeping Jessica warm, keeping her close, waiting for the right moment to reintroduce her into Ryan's life. And I'd made it easy for her. Every time I'd worked late, every time I'd prioritized a client deadline over a Sunday dinner, every time I'd suggested Ryan go visit his mother alone because I was tired or busy or just needed some space, I'd been handing Patricia opportunities to work on him, to remind him of Jessica, to plant seeds of doubt about our marriage. I drove home that afternoon and did something I'd never done before. I went through Ryan's things. His laptop was password protected, but his iPad wasn't. I found his messages app and started scrolling. Most of it was mundane, work conversations, texts with friends about meeting up for drinks, exchanges with me about dinner plans and grocery lists. But then I found a thread with his mother that made my blood run cold. "Patricia, had lunch with Jessica today. She asked about you." "Ryan, that's nice. How is she?" "Patricia, wonderful. She's really come into her own since the divorce. So confident and self-assured now. You should see her."
Ryan.
"Mom." "Patricia. What?" "I'm just saying she's doing well. You two were always such good friends. There's no reason you can't catch up sometime." "Ryan, I'm married." "Patricia, of course you are, sweetheart. I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate. Just that old friends can still be friends. Natalie's so busy with work anyway. I'm sure she wouldn't mind if you had coffee with an old classmate." "Ryan, I don't think that's a good idea." "Patricia, you're probably right. It's just hard to see you so stressed lately." You work so hard and Natalie works so hard, and sometimes I wonder if you two have time to actually enjoy each other anymore. That conversation was from 8 months ago. There were others like it.
Dozens of them.
Patricia, always subtle, always careful, never quite saying anything explicitly wrong, but always pushing, suggesting, planting. You seemed happier in college. I ran into Jessica at the market. She mentioned how much she enjoyed your philosophy class discussions. Do you remember those? Marriage is hard work. Sometimes people grow apart. It's nobody's fault. Natalie is lovely, but she's so focused on her career. Do you think she even notices how stressed you are?
Drip. Drip. Drip.
Death by 1,000 subtle suggestions. The worst part was Ryan's responses. At first, they were resistant, loyal. Mom, stop. I love my wife. This isn't appropriate. But over time, they got shorter. Less defensive. Yeah, I remember. She's busy a lot. I don't know. My husband didn't know if his wife noticed his stress. Didn't know if we were growing apart. Didn't know if Jessica had been the right choice all along, and I'd been the mistake. I closed the iPad and sat on our bed, the bed where Jessica had probably been just days ago, and I finally let myself cry. Not the angry tears I'd been holding back, but something deeper. Grief for the marriage I'd thought I had, for the man I'd thought Ryan was, for the naive, trusting version of myself who'd believed that love and honesty were enough. But I only let myself cry for 10 minutes. Then I washed my face, reapplied my makeup, and got back to work. Because grief was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. I needed to understand everything before I made my move. Every player, every motivation, every weakness. Starting with Patricia's. That evening, I made Ryan's favorite dinner, pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables and risotto. I opened a nice bottle of wine. I asked about his day and listened attentively when he talked about a difficult project at work. I was the perfect wife. After dinner, I brought up Patricia. Your mom seemed a little off at dinner on Sunday, I said casually, loading dishes into the dishwasher. Is everything okay with her? Ryan looked up from his laptop, surprised. I think she's fine. Why? I don't know. She just seemed, I can't put my finger on it. Maybe a little lonely? She's always been lonely since Dad died. You know that. I know. I just wonder if we could do more for her. I paused, like the thought was just occurring to me. What if we invited her to do something with us this weekend? Not Sunday dinner at her place, but something fun. Maybe that new exhibit at the Portland Art Museum? Ryan's entire face brightened. Really? You'd want to do that? Of course. She's your mom. She's family. I smiled at him. I know I've been distant with her sometimes. I want to fix that. He came over and hugged me, and I could feel his relief in the way he held on just a little too tight. Thank you, he said into my hair. This means a lot to me. I hugged him back, my cheek against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. This man had betrayed me, had brought another woman into our home, into our bed, had let his mother poison our marriage for months, maybe years. But he also thought he was doing the right thing. Patricia had convinced him that I was the problem, that our marriage was failing, that Jessica represented something he'd lost. She'd manipulated him as thoroughly as she'd manipulated me. The difference was I saw it now, and I was going to use it. Saturday afternoon, the three of us met at the Portland Art Museum. Patricia arrived in a cloud of Chanel No. 5, perfectly dressed in cashmere and silk, her expression a mixture of surprise and pleasure. Natalie, this was such a thoughtful idea, she said, kissing my cheek. I'm so glad you suggested it. Of course she thought it was my idea. Ryan would have told her that. Good. We wandered through the contemporary exhibits, and I made sure to engage Patricia in conversation. Asked her opinion on pieces. Complimented her eye for design. Mentioned that I'd love to learn more about her work, that I'd always admired her aesthetic sense. You know, I said as we stood in front of a particularly striking installation, I feel like I've never really taken the time to get to know you. Not really. And that's my fault. Patricia's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read.
Oh, sweetheart.
You're busy. You have your own life, but you're Ryan's mother. You're important to him, which makes you important to me. I touched her arm lightly. I'd like to do better. Maybe we could have lunch sometime? Just us. I watched her process this. Watched her try to figure out the angle, the trap, but there was no angle she could see. I was offering her exactly what she'd always wanted: closer access, more influence, a daughter-in-law who deferred to her. "I'd like that very much," she finally said, and her smile was genuine. Or as genuine as Patricia ever got. We had lunch the following Wednesday at a French bistro in the Pearl District. Patricia ordered for both of us. She insisted, said she knew the menu well, and I let her. We talked about design, about her clients, about the challenges of running a business as a woman in a male-dominated field. "You're so accomplished," I said, and I meant it. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just playing at having a career, you know? Like I'm not taken seriously because I work from home." "Remote work can be isolating," Patricia agreed. She sipped her wine. "And it's hard to build real professional relationships when you're not face-to-face with people." That's exactly it. Sometimes I wonder if I'm missing out. If I should be doing something different. What does Ryan think? There it was. Every conversation with Patricia eventually circled back to Ryan. He's supportive. But I think he worries that I'm not. I don't know. That I'm not present enough. That I'm too focused on work. "Are you?" Patricia's voice was gentle, concerned. "Too focused on work? Maybe. Probably." I looked down at my plate. It's just easier sometimes, you know? Work has clear goals. Clear metrics of success. Marriage is so much more complicated. I was feeding her exactly what she wanted to hear, confirming every doubt she'd planted in Ryan's mind, presenting myself as the career-obsessed wife who'd lost sight of what mattered. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Natalie, can I be honest with you? Please. I think you're putting too much pressure on yourself, trying to be everything to everyone, the perfect wife, the successful career woman. It's okay to admit that you can't do it all. But I should be able to," I said, letting my voice crack just slightly. "Ryan deserves someone who can. Ryan deserves someone who makes him happy, who he can build a life with." She paused delicately. "Sometimes the timing of a relationship matters as much as the relationship itself. Sometimes people meet at the wrong point in their lives." I looked up at her, letting confusion and hurt play across my face. "Are you saying—" "I'm just saying that it's okay to acknowledge when something isn't working, when maybe you both want different things." Her eyes were so sympathetic, so kind. "You're young, Natalie. You have your whole career ahead of you. You shouldn't have to sacrifice that for anyone." She was giving me permission to leave, to end my marriage, making it sound like it was for my own good, my own growth. "I love Ryan," I said quietly. "I know you do, sweetheart. But sometimes love isn't enough." We finished lunch, and Patricia hugged me goodbye with what seemed like genuine affection. "I'm here for you," she said. "Whatever you need, whatever you decide." I drove home and added notes to my secret folder. Patricia thought she was winning, thought she was gently steering me toward a divorce that would clear the path for Jessica. She had no idea that every word she'd said, every subtle manipulation, was being documented and cataloged. But I still needed more. I needed to understand what Jessica was getting out of this, what Patricia had promised her, what their endgame looked like. So I did something reckless. I made an appointment at Jessica's therapy practice. I used my maiden name, Natalie Chun, booked a consultation for the following week, said I was dealing with stress and relationship anxiety. The receptionist confirmed my appointment cheerfully, no recognition in her voice at all. Walking into Jessica Chen's office the next Tuesday was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. She looked up from her desk when I entered, and for one horrible second, I thought she knew. Thought she recognized me from photos or from that one terrible night when she'd been in my house. But her expression remained professionally pleasant. "Natalie? Please come in. Have a seat." I sat in the chair across from her, in this tastefully decorated office with its soothing color palette and strategic plant placement, and I looked at the woman my mother-in-law had chosen to replace me. She was beautiful. I'd known that already, but seeing her in person was different. She had this calm, grounded energy that I imagined people found comforting. Her voice was warm without being cloying. She seemed genuine. "So," she said, pen poised over a notepad, "what brings you in today?" I almost laughed. "What brings me in? You're sleeping with my husband. His mother is orchestrating the destruction of my marriage. I'm sitting across from you right now trying to figure out if you're a victim or a villain. Instead, I said, I'm having trouble in my marriage. I don't know if I can trust my own perceptions anymore. Jessica nodded sympathetically. That must be very difficult. Can you tell me more about what's making you question yourself? And just like that, I spent the next 45 minutes in therapy with my husband's mistress, describing my marriage to her, leaving out identifying details, of course, but painting a picture she'd recognize if she was paying attention. I talked about a mother-in-law who seemed overly involved, about a husband who seemed distant, about feeling like I was competing with a past I could never measure up to. Jessica listened with what seemed like genuine compassion. She asked thoughtful questions. She didn't interrupt or judge. And at no point did she show any sign that she recognized the situation I was describing as her own handiwork. Either she was an exceptional actress, or she genuinely didn't see the parallels. It sounds like you're carrying a lot, she said as our session wound down. Relationship anxiety often stems from a feeling that we're not in control of our own narratives, that someone else is writing our story. I almost broke character then. Almost asked her if she realized she was literally helping someone else write my story. But I just nodded. I'd like to see you again, Jessica said. I think we could do some good work together on rebuilding your sense of self within the relationship. I booked another appointment for the following week. Walking out of that office, I felt like I'd stepped through a mirror into some alternate reality where nothing made sense. Jessica seemed like a good therapist. She seemed kind. How is this the same person who'd been in my bed, who'd been exchanging letters with Patricia about breaking up my marriage? Unless she didn't know. The thought stopped me cold on the sidewalk outside her building. What if Jessica didn't know I was Ryan's wife? What if Patricia had kept that detail from her? I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through those photos I'd taken of the letters in Patricia's office. Read them again with new eyes. Patricia had always referred to me as Ryan's wife or the current situation. Never by name. The letters from Jessica expressed guilt about interfering in someone's marriage, but they were always vague, always abstract. And that night when I'd seen Jessica arrive at my house, she'd used a key Patricia must have given her. Had Patricia told her it was her own house? That she was arranging a private dinner for Ryan at her place, not ours? The manipulation went deeper than I'd realized. Patricia wasn't just playing me and Ryan. She was playing Jessica too. My second therapy session with Jessica confirmed my suspicion. I carefully dropped details about where I lived, the Hawthorne district, our craftsman bungalow. I mentioned my work in graphic design. I even mentioned my mother-in-law lived in Lake Oswego. Jessica's expression never flickered. She didn't recognize any of it. After that session, I sat in my car for a long time thinking. I had 3 options. Option 1. Confront everyone. Tell Ryan about Jessica. Tell Jessica about Ryan. Blow everything up in a spectacular explosion of truth and consequences. Option 2. Leave quietly. Divorce Ryan, walk away. Let Patricia have her victory. Option 3. Something else. Something Patricia wouldn't see coming because it required a kind of patience and calculation she'd never think I possessed. I chose option 3. Because I'd realized something important. Patricia's power came from her ability to manipulate without being seen. To pull strings while maintaining plausible deniability. To ruin lives while keeping her hands clean. But that only worked if no one knew what she was doing. And I knew. More than that, I understood how to dismantle it. Not through confrontation or legal action or dramatic revelations, but by carefully, methodically, removing every piece of the structure she'd built until the whole thing collapsed under its own weight. Starting with Jessica, I scheduled a 3rd appointment. But this time, I brought something with me, copies of the photos I'd taken from Patricia's filing cabinet, the letters between Jessica and Patricia, the evidence of their years-long correspondence. Before we start, I said when I sat down, I need to show you something. I handed her the folder, watched her face as she opened it, watched recognition dawn, then confusion, then horror. Where did you get these? Her voice was barely a whisper. Patricia Harrison's home office. My mother-in-law's home office. I paused. I'm Ryan's wife, Jessica. And I think you and I need to talk. The color drained from her face. "Oh my God. Did you know?" I asked, and I kept my voice gentle. "When you came to my house that night 3 weeks ago, when you used the key Patricia gave you, did you know it was my house?" She was shaking. She said it was her house. She said Ryan was coming to her place for dinner. She said, Jessica looked down at the letters, at years of Patricia's careful manipulation laid out in black and white. "Oh my God. She's been lying to me. She's been lying to all of us." We spent the next 2 hours in that office. Not as therapist and client, not as wife and mistress, but as two women slowly realizing they'd been pieces in someone else's game. Jessica showed me her phone. Text messages from Patricia going back years. Invitations to events where Ryan would coincidentally be. Suggestions that Jessica reach out to him. Assurances that his marriage was failing, that Natalie, that I was cold and distant and wrong for him. "She said you were having an affair," Jessica said, her voice hollow. "She said you were neglecting Ryan, that he was miserable. She made it sound like I was helping him escape an unhappy situation." "Were you sleeping with him?" Jessica looked me in the eye.
Once.
"That night at your house. Patricia said it was her place, that she wanted to give us privacy to talk. I brought wine, and we talked, and then she closed her eyes. I stopped it before anything happened. I told him I couldn't do this, that I respected his marriage even if his mother didn't. He seemed confused. Said his mother had told him I still had feelings for him, that I wanted another chance. Ryan had resisted. Or at least, he'd been confused enough about the setup that things hadn't progressed. Patricia had been orchestrating a seduction, but her puppets hadn't performed the way she'd scripted. "Does he know?" Jessica asked. "That you know about any of this?"
No.
"What are you going to do?" I looked at this woman who'd been as much a victim of Patricia's manipulation as I had, who genuinely thought she was helping someone escape an unhappy marriage, who'd been used and lied to for years by a woman she'd trusted as a mentor. "I'm going to give Patricia exactly what she wants," I said. "And then I'm going to make sure she loses everything that matters to her." Jessica was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "How can I help?" We made a plan. It was risky and complicated and required perfect timing. But it was also beautiful in its symmetry. Patricia had used manipulation and lies to try to destroy my marriage. I was going to use truth and transparency to destroy her credibility. Not with Ryan.
Not yet.
With everyone else in her life that mattered. Her clients. Her social circle. Her carefully constructed image as the devoted mother and successful businesswoman who'd overcome the tragedy of early widowhood. Jessica had access to all of it. She'd been embedded in Patricia's world for years. She knew which clients were unhappy, which friendships were superficial, which parts of Patricia's perfect facade were most fragile. And I had evidence. Letters. Text messages. A documented pattern of manipulation spanning years. Together, we started building a case. Not for a courtroom. Patricia hadn't done anything technically illegal, but for the court of public opinion in the circles that mattered to her most. It took 3 weeks of careful preparation. 3 weeks of me playing the struggling wife who was thinking about divorce. 3 weeks of Patricia growing more confident, more careless, sure that her plan was working. 3 weeks of Jessica and me meeting in secret, coordinating, planning, preparing for the moment when we'd pull the rug out from under Patricia Harrison's perfect life. And through it all, I went home to Ryan every night.
Kissed him.
Made dinner with him. Lay next to him in bed and listened to him breathe. I still loved him. That was the worst part. Underneath all the betrayal and lies and manipulation, I still loved the man I'd married. The man who'd kiss me in the rain on our 3rd date. The man who'd promised to build a life with me. But love wasn't enough anymore. Not when it had been weaponized by his mother. Not when he'd been so easily manipulated into doubting us. Maybe that was Patricia's real crime. Not the manipulation itself, but showing me that the foundation of my marriage had never been as solid as I'd believed. That Ryan's love for me was conditional on his mother's approval. That I'd never really been part of his family at all. I'd been tolerated, accepted tentatively, but never truly welcomed into the sacred circle of two that was Patricia and her son.
Well,
That circle was about to get a lot more crowded. And Patricia was about to learn what happened when you underestimated the woman you'd been trying to erase. The plan was set. The pieces were in place. All we needed now was the perfect moment. And Patricia, bless her manipulative heart, was about to give it to us. The perfect moment came disguised as a charity gala. Patricia's interior design firm was sponsoring a fundraiser for the Portland Museum of Contemporary Art, one of those black tie events where Portland's wealthy and influential gathered to write checks and congratulate each other on their generosity. Patricia had been on the planning committee for months, and she'd mentioned it at least a dozen times during Sunday dinners, dropping casual hints about how important it was, how it would be wonderful if Ryan and I could attend. 2 weeks before the event, she called Ryan directly. I was sitting next to him on the couch when his phone rang, close enough to hear her voice through the speaker when he answered. "Sweetheart, I have the most wonderful news. I've secured a table for the gala, and I want you and Natalie there. It's going to be such an important evening for the firm." Ryan glanced at me, and I nodded encouragingly. "We'd love to come, Mom." "Oh, perfect." "And Ryan, I was thinking Jessica is going to be there as well. She's been such a help with the planning, and I thought it might be nice for the three of you to finally all spend some time together. Clear the air, so to speak." There it was. Patricia's endgame, wrapped up in a charity event with 200 witnesses. She wanted us all in the same room. Wanted to watch the drama unfold in public, where I'd be forced to maintain composure while she paraded Jessica in front of me. Where Ryan would be caught between his wife and his first love, with his mother orchestrating the whole thing like some twisted puppet master. It was perfect. Not for her reasons, but for mine. "That sounds great, Mom," Ryan said, and I could hear the tension in his voice. He knew this was weird. He just didn't know how weird. After he hung up, he turned to me with an expression that was half apology, half resignation. "You don't have to go if you don't want to." "Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss it." I smiled at him, and I meant it. "It'll be good to finally meet this Jessica your mom talks about so much." He looked relieved and confused at the same time, which was becoming his default expression around me lately. "You're amazing, you know that?" I kissed him softly. "I know." That night, after Ryan fell asleep, I texted Jessica from the burner phone we'd been using to communicate. She's making her move. Gala in 2 weeks. "Are you ready?" "Jessica, I've been ready for years. Let's end this." The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in strategic preparation. Jessica and I met 3 times, always carefully, always in places where we wouldn't be seen together. We refined our plan, anticipated Patricia's moves, prepared for every possible variation of how the evening might unfold. Jessica had reached out to several of Patricia's clients. The ones she'd mentioned were unhappy, the ones who felt overcharged or undervalued. She'd planted subtle seeds of doubt, nothing actionable, just gentle suggestions that perhaps they should review their contracts more carefully. Look at the billing a little closer. Compare Patricia's rates to other firms. I'd done my own groundwork. I'd become friendly with several women in Patricia's social circle, attending a few of the charity luncheons and fundraiser planning meetings I'd previously avoided. I'd listened to them talk, learned who had grievances, who felt slighted by Patricia's sometimes imperious manner, who secretly resented her success. People love to complain. They just need permission and an audience. I'd also done something that felt dangerous, but necessary. I'd installed monitoring software on our home computer, the one Ryan and I shared. It tracked his searches, his emails, his browsing history. I told myself it was about gathering evidence, about protecting myself. But really, I needed to know if there were things I'd missed. Other lies. Other betrayals. What I found was somehow worse than infidelity. Ryan had been searching for divorce lawyers, reading articles about separation, looking at apartment listings for one-bedroom places in neighborhoods he could afford alone. He was planning to leave me. Or, at least, he was thinking about it seriously enough to research the logistics. I found search queries from 3 months ago. How to tell your wife you're not happy. Signs a marriage is over. Is it normal to still have feelings for an ex? More recent searches were more specific. Oregon divorce laws. How to split assets fairly. Best divorce mediators Portland. The most recent search, from just 2 days ago. How to know if you're making the right decision. I sat at that computer for an hour, reading through his digital footprints, watching my marriage dissolve in search engine queries and bookmarked articles. He hadn't pulled the trigger yet, hadn't contacted a lawyer or opened a separate bank account. But he was standing on the edge, working up the courage to jump. And Patricia was right there behind him, ready to push. I wanted to scream, to throw the computer across the room, to wake Ryan up and demand answers, force a confrontation, make him look at me, and explain how we'd gotten here. But I didn't, because that was what Patricia wanted. The dramatic explosion, the messy divorce, the clear path for Jessica to step into my place. Instead, I took screenshots of everything, added them to my growing file of evidence, and I waited. The night of the gala, I spent 3 hours getting ready. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, a deep emerald silk that hugged my curves and made my dark hair look even darker, my skin luminous. I'd gone to a professional makeup artist, had my hair styled in soft waves that fell past my shoulders. When I came downstairs, Ryan actually stopped mid-sentence in whatever he'd been saying on the phone. His eyes went wide. "I'll call you back, Mom," he said, and hung up without waiting for a response.
Net så videnskapelig.
"You look, wow. Thank you." I kissed his cheek, careful not to smudge my lipstick. "You clean up pretty well yourself."
He did.
Ryan in a tuxedo was still capable of making my heart skip, even now, even knowing what I knew. He looked like the man I'd married, the man I'd loved, before his mother had gotten her hooks into our marriage. The drive to the gala was quiet. Ryan's hands were tight on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched in that way it got when he was anxious. "You okay?" I asked.
Yeah.
It's going to be weird. Seeing Jessica, with you there. Why would it be weird? She's just your college ex-girlfriend, right? Ancient history. He glanced at me sharply, trying to gauge if there was an edge to my words. But I kept my expression open, curious, innocent. "Right," he said slowly. "Ancient history." The gala was being held at the museum itself, in the soaring main gallery with its white walls and dramatic lighting. By the time we arrived, the space was already filled with Portland's elite. Women in designer gowns and men in tuxedos, champagne flutes glinting under the spotlights, the murmur of conversation mixing with a string quartet playing in the corner. Patricia saw us immediately. She was holding court near the entrance, resplendent in a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than my car, her hair perfect, her smile radiant. "There they are." She swept over to us, kissed Ryan's cheek, squeezed my hand. "Natalie, you look absolutely stunning. That dress is perfect on you." "Thank you, Patricia. You look beautiful as always. Come, let me introduce you to everyone." She looped her arm through Ryan's and started steering him into the crowd, leaving me to follow like an afterthought. I caught glimpses of Jessica across the room. She was wearing navy blue, elegant and understated, talking with a group of people I recognized from Patricia's social media. She saw me and gave the tiniest nod. Everything was in place. Patricia made a production of introducing Ryan around, making sure everyone knew he was her son, talking about his important work in environmental engineering, mentioning casually that he'd graduated top of his class from Oregon State. She was claiming him, marking territory, showing everyone that he was hers first, hers most, hers always. I smiled and nodded and played the supportive wife, even as I watched Patricia's performance with new eyes. This was what she did. This was her power. The ability to control a room, to shape narratives, to make everyone see things the way she wanted them seen. But narratives could be rewritten. Dinner was a calculated nightmare. Patricia had arranged the seating so that Ryan was between her and Jessica, with me across the table, flanked by 2 of Patricia's business associates who spent the meal talking to each other across me like I wasn't there. I watched Patricia work throughout the meal. Watched her hand touch Ryan's arm when she laughed. Watched her lean close to whisper something to Jessica, who smiled politely but didn't lean in. Watched her orchestrate little moments of nostalgia between Ryan and Jessica. "Remember when you two went to that concert? Jessica was just telling me about that camping trip you organized senior year." Ryan looked increasingly uncomfortable. Jessica looked composed but distant. And Patricia looked triumphant, like a director watching her carefully staged production finally come together. What she didn't see was Jessica's phone, discreetly in her lap, sending me updates. She's been drinking more than usual. She just told me Ryan has been unhappy for months. She wants me to suggest we all have coffee together after this.
Perfect.
The more confident Patricia got, the more careless she'd become. After dinner, there were speeches. The museum director talked about the importance of supporting the arts. Patricia gave a keynote about how design shapes the spaces we live in and the lives we lead. She was eloquent and charming, and people applauded enthusiastically. During the applause, I excused myself to the restroom. Jessica was already there, touching up her lipstick at the mirror. We were alone. She's drunk, Jessica said quietly. Not obviously, but enough. She told me to make sure I got time alone with Ryan tonight. Said she'd keep you occupied. Is Ryan playing along? He looks miserable. I don't think he knows what's happening, but he knows something's off. I checked my reflection, reapplied my own lipstick. Time for Act 2. We timed it perfectly. The gala was winding down, people starting to filter out to the after party in a smaller gallery. Patricia was surrounded by well-wishers and donors, accepting compliments and writing down names. I approached the group with Jessica beside me. Patricia, I said, loud enough that everyone around her could hear, I wanted to thank you for inviting us tonight. And I especially wanted to thank you for being so welcoming to Jessica. I know how important she is to you. Patricia's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. Confusion, maybe. Suspicion. Of course, dear. Jessica is very special to our family. She really is. In fact, I was hoping the three of us could talk for a moment.
Privately.
I smiled warmly at the people around us. Family matters, you understand. Patricia couldn't refuse without looking rude in front of her social circle. Of course. Let's step over here. We moved to a quieter corner of the gallery, away from the crowd but still visible. I wanted witnesses for what came next, even if they couldn't hear the details. What's this about, Natalie? Patricia's voice was still pleasant, but there was steel underneath. It's about honesty, I said. And I think it's time we were all honest with each other, don't you? I don't know what you mean. I think you do. I pulled out my phone, opened the folder of screenshots I'd prepared. I found something interesting a few weeks ago. Letters, actually. In your home office. Between you and Jessica. Patricia's face went very still. You went through my private files? I did. And I found years of correspondence about your plan to break up my marriage and get Ryan back together with Jessica. I turned the phone so she could see the screen. Would you like to see? There are some particularly interesting passages about manipulating Ryan's perception of our relationship. Natalie, I don't know what you think you found, but... She told me you deny it, Jessica interrupted quietly. Just like you told me Natalie was having an affair. Just like you told Ryan that I never got over him. Just like you've been telling everyone different versions of the truth for years. Patricia's eyes darted between us, and I watched her realize what had happened. That we'd compared notes. That we'd figured it out. You have no idea what you're talking about, Patricia said, but her voice had lost its certainty. Don't I? I pulled up another screenshot. Here's where you tell Jessica that my marriage to Ryan was a mistake. That he settled for me because he was lonely and I was convenient. That he's been unhappy for years. And here, Jessica said, pulling out her own phone, is where you tell me that Natalie is cold and distant. That she's having an affair with a colleague. That Ryan confided in you that he's fallen out of love with her. You've been lying to everyone, I continued. Different lies to different people, keeping us all isolated so we wouldn't compare stories. But we did compare stories, Patricia. And now we see exactly what you've been doing. Patricia's composure was cracking. Ryan deserves better than this. Better than you. Jessica makes him happy. I don't actually, Jessica said firmly. I'm not in love with Ryan. I haven't been for over a decade. You've been using my guilt and my desire to help people against me, convincing me I was saving him from an unhappy marriage. But you were lying about that too. Everything you've told any of us has been in service of one goal, I said. Controlling Ryan. Keeping him dependent on you. Making sure no one else. Not Jessica, not me, not anyone could ever be as important to him as you are. I'm his mother. I want what's best for him.
No.
My voice was quiet but absolutely certain. You want what's best for you. You want him to need you. And you're willing to destroy his marriage, manipulate the woman he loved in college, and lie to everyone around you to make that happen. Patricia looked at both of us, and I saw the moment she decided to go on the offensive. You're being ridiculous. Both of you. Ryan loves his family. He won't believe. Won't believe what? Ryan's voice came from behind us. I turned to see him standing there, his face pale, his expression confused and hurt. How long have you been standing there? Patricia asked, and for the first time, I heard fear in her voice. Long enough. Ryan looked at me, then at Jessica, then at his mother. What the hell is going on? This was the moment. The crisis point where everything could either shatter completely or begin to rebuild. I took a breath and made my choice. Your mother has been manipulating all of us for years. She's been trying to break up our marriage so she could get you back together with Jessica. She's been lying to me, lying to Jessica, and I pulled up the text messages I'd found on Ryan's iPad, the ones between him and Patricia, lying to you. I handed him my phone, watched him scroll through the screenshots, the letters, the documented evidence of Patricia's manipulation. His face went through a dozen different emotions: confusion, disbelief, anger, hurt. Mom. His voice cracked on the word. Is this true? Patricia's mask finally fell away completely. What emerged underneath was something desperate and ugly. You don't understand. She's not right for you, Ryan. I could see it from the beginning. She's too focused on her career, too independent. She doesn't need you the way you need me? Ryan's voice was hollow.
Jesus Christ, Mom.
I just want you to be happy. No, you want me to be yours. He looked at the phone in his hand, at the evidence of years of manipulation, and something in him seemed to break. How could you do this? Ryan, sweetheart.
Don't.
He handed me back my phone and looked at Jessica. Did you sleep with me?
Once.
Almost. Jessica's voice was steady. That night at what I thought was your mother's house. I stopped it before anything happened. I told you I couldn't do it. Because you knew it was wrong, or because you found out it was my house? Both. I found out the truth shortly after. Natalie and I have been working together since then. Ryan turned to me, and there was something broken in his eyes. You knew. For weeks you knew, and you didn't say anything. I needed to understand what was happening. Who was doing what? And I needed evidence that couldn't be explained away or denied. You didn't trust me enough to just ask me? Did you trust me enough to tell me you were researching divorce lawyers? The words came out sharper than I'd intended, months of hurt and betrayal finally breaking through. Did you trust me enough to mention that you were having doubts? Or were you just going to let your mother manipulate you into leaving me without ever giving me a chance to fight for us? Ryan flinched like I'd slapped him. Patricia tried one more time. Ryan, please. You have to understand. Get away from me. His voice was quiet but absolute. I don't want to hear another word from you. Not tonight. Not, he broke off, shaking his head. I can't even look at you right now. He turned and walked away, heading for the exit. I started to follow, but Jessica caught my arm. Give him a minute, she said softly. This is a lot. I watched him go, watched Patricia stand there looking lost and diminished, her perfect facade crumbling. Around us, the gala continued. People who'd witnessed the confrontation from a distance were whispering, speculating. Patricia's perfect evening, her carefully constructed image, was unraveling in real time. I should go after him, I said. You should, Jessica agreed. But Natalie? Whatever happens with you and Ryan, thank you for showing me what she was doing, for giving me a chance to stop being her puppet. I squeezed her hand. Then I went to find my husband. I found him in the parking lot, leaning against our car, his face in his hands. Ryan, were you ever going to tell me? He looked up, and his eyes were red. Or were you just going to let me figure it out on my own? I was going to tell you tonight. This was always the plan, to get everyone together, make her show her hand, make it impossible for her to deny. You manipulated me, just like she did.
No.
I walked closer, but didn't touch him. I gave you the truth. All of it, with evidence you couldn't dismiss. Your mother has been lying to you for years, whispering doubts about us, making you question your own happiness. And my voice broke. I didn't know how to compete with that, how to prove I wasn't the problem when she had you so convinced that I was. I never thought you were the problem. You were researching divorce lawyers, Ryan. He closed his eyes. I was confused, unhappy. But he stopped. She was in my head, making me doubt everything. And I let her because it's always been the two of us since Dad died. I didn't know how to not trust her.
And me?
Did you trust me? I wanted to.
God, I wanted to.
But she kept saying things, pointing out all the ways we were different, all the ways you seemed distant, and I started seeing it everywhere even when it wasn't there. We stood in the cold parking lot, and I felt the full weight of everything Patricia had stolen from us. Not just weeks or months, but years of our marriage. Every doubt, every moment of distance, every small resentment, all of it poisoned by her manipulation. I don't know how to fix this, I said finally. I don't know if we can. Do you want to? Ryan looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in months. Because I do. I want to try. But I don't know if you can forgive me for being stupid enough to let her do this to us. I don't know either. The honesty hurt, but it felt necessary. I love you. I never stopped loving you. But Ryan, your mother tried to destroy our marriage. She almost succeeded. And you helped her, even if you didn't mean to. I know. His voice cracked. I know, and I'm sorry, and I don't know how to make this right. Neither do I. We stood there in silence, the weight of everything unsaid and broken hanging between us. Inside the museum, Patricia was dealing with the aftermath of her exposure. Outside, 200 feet away, her son and his wife were trying to figure out if love was enough to rebuild what she'd spent years tearing down. I didn't have an answer.
Not yet.
All I knew was that Patricia had lost tonight. Lost her credibility, lost her control, lost the unquestioning devotion of her son. But what I'd lost might be even more permanent.
Trust. Certainty.
The naive belief that love and honesty were sufficient protection against the world's cruelty. Can we go home? Ryan asked quietly. I looked at him. This man I'd married. This man I'd built a life with. This man who'd let his mother nearly destroy us because he didn't know how to set boundaries with the only parent he had left. Yeah, I said. We can go home. But as we drove through Portland's rain-slicked streets, neither of us speaking, I knew that home was just a building now. Just a place we both happened to live. Whether it could ever be something more than that again, whether we could rebuild trust and intimacy and partnership from the wreckage of Patricia's manipulation, that was still an open question. And sitting in the passenger seat of my own car, watching the city lights blur past, I realized I didn't know the answer. I'd won the battle tonight. Exposed Patricia. Taken away her power. But the war for my marriage, the real war, the one that mattered, that was still raging. And I had no idea who would win. The thing about exposing someone's lies is that it doesn't automatically make everything true again. It just makes everything uncertain. Ryan and I spent the first 3 days after the gala existing in the same space without really occupying it together. He slept in the guest room. I worked longer hours than necessary. We were polite when we crossed paths in the kitchen, careful not to touch, careful not to say anything that might crack the fragile ceasefire we'd established. On the 4th day, Ryan finally broke the silence. We need to talk, he said over breakfast. Really talk. I looked up from my coffee. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't been sleeping. I probably looked the same. Okay. We sat at our dining room table, the one we'd picked out together 3 years ago, arguing good-naturedly about whether to get the reclaimed wood or the modern glass, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. I've been thinking, Ryan started then stopped. I've been thinking about everything Mom said to me over the years. And I'm trying to figure out what was real and what was her manipulation, and I can't tell the difference anymore. What do you mean? Like, she'd say you seemed stressed about work, and I'd think back and remember you being stressed, but now I don't know if you were actually stressed or if I just started seeing stress because she planted the idea. Or she'd mention that we didn't laugh as much as we used to, and suddenly I couldn't remember the last time we'd laughed together, even though we probably had. It's like she rewrote my memories while I was still living them. I understood exactly what he meant. Patricia had done the same thing to both of us, in different ways. She told me you thought I was cold, I said quietly, that you'd confided in her that I wasn't affectionate enough. So I started second-guessing every interaction, wondering if I was showing you enough love, being present enough. And the more I tried, the more self-conscious I became, until I probably did become distant because I was so worried about being distant.
Jesus.
Ryan put his head in his hands. We let her gaslight both of us. She's had a lot of practice. And she had something neither of us had. She didn't care about the collateral damage. We were trying to preserve our marriage. She was trying to destroy it. That gave her an advantage. Ryan looked up. I want to fix this.
Us.
But I don't know how. Neither do I. I paused. But I know we can't do it with your mother in our lives. Not the way she's been. I know.
His voice was heavy.
I haven't talked to her since the gala. She's been calling, texting. I've been ignoring all of it. Eventually, you'll have to deal with her. I know that too. He met my eyes. But right now, I need to deal with us. If there still isn't us. The question hung between us like a challenge. I don't know if there is, I said honestly. I love you. I think you love me. But love isn't enough when the foundation is cracked. So, what do we do? I'd been thinking about this for days. Weighing options. Considering possibilities. And I'd come to a conclusion that surprised me. Therapy, I said. Real therapy. Not with Jessica. I added quickly, seeing his expression. But someone who specializes in rebuilding trust after betrayal. Someone who can help us figure out what's real and what was Patricia's poison. You'd be willing to try? I think so. But Ryan, you need to understand something. I leaned forward. If we do this, you have to be all in. You have to be willing to set real boundaries with your mother. You have to be willing to choose us over her, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I can do that. Can you? I kept my voice gentle but firm. Because she's been the most important person in your life since your father died. And I'm asking you to fundamentally change that relationship. To see her clearly, flaws and manipulation and all. That's not easy. Ryan was quiet for a long time. Then he said, the night of the gala after we got home, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the things she'd said to me over the years. And I realized something. I've been grieving my father for 13 years. And instead of helping me heal from that, Mom kept the wound open. Kept me dependent on her. Kept me from fully moving forward into my own life. He looked at me, and there was something new in his expression. Something harder and clearer. She didn't want me to be happy. She wanted me to need her. And I can't, his voice cracked. I can't keep living like that. I can't let her do that to us anymore. It was the most honest thing he'd said to me in months. Maybe years. Okay, I said. Then we try. We started therapy the following week. Dr. Sarah Winters was a marriage counselor who specialized in what she called relational trauma, the damage done to relationships by outside forces and internal betrayals. She was in her 50s, calm and direct, and she didn't let either of us hide behind comfortable lies. Our first session was brutal. She had us each tell our version of the past year, and listening to Ryan describe his experience. The doubt Patricia had planted, the confusion he'd felt, the way he'd started to believe our marriage was failing even though he couldn't point to any specific reason why. It was like hearing about a completely different relationship than the one I'd thought we were living. You were both being manipulated, Dr. Winters said after we'd finished. And manipulation works by isolating people, making them doubt their own perceptions. Patricia kept you separated, not physically, but emotionally. She made sure you weren't comparing notes or communicating about the doubts she was planting. So, what do we do now? Ryan asked. You learn to communicate again. Honestly. Without filters. And you do the hard work of figuring out what you both actually want, not what Patricia wanted for you. It turned out the hard work was really fucking hard. We had sessions where I cried angry tears about the betrayal, about finding Jessica in our house, about the months of lies. We had sessions where Ryan had to confront the fact that he'd been complicit in his mother's manipulation, that his inability to set boundaries had nearly cost him his marriage. We fought. Not the polite, careful disagreements we'd had before, but real fights about real issues.
About trust.
About boundaries. About whether we even wanted the same things anymore. But we also started talking. Really talking. About things we'd avoided for years because they seemed too small to matter or too big to solve. 3 weeks into therapy, Dr. Winters gave us an assignment. I want you to go on a date, she said. Not to your favorite restaurant or somewhere familiar. Somewhere new. Somewhere neither of you has been. And I want you to spend the evening pretending you're meeting for the first time. Get to know each other again without the weight of all this history. It felt artificial and awkward, but we did it anyway. We chose a new Ethiopian restaurant that had just opened in Southeast Portland. Ryan picked me up at the house like we were strangers, and we drove to the restaurant making small talk about the weather, about the city, about nothing important. At dinner, we played the game Dr. Winters had assigned. We asked first date questions. What's your favorite book? If you could live anywhere, where would it be? What's your biggest fear? And something strange happened. Somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, we stopped performing and started being genuine. Ryan told me about a project he was working on, his eyes lighting up the way they used to when he talked about work he was passionate about. I told him about a client whose branding I'd completely reimagined, and he asked insightful questions that made me see my own work differently. We laughed. Actually laughed, for the first time in months. On the drive home, Ryan reached over and took my hand, just held it, his thumb rubbing small circles on my palm. I miss you, he said quietly. I miss us. I miss us too. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because we still hadn't dealt with the Patricia-shaped hole in the middle of our lives. She'd been calling both of us relentlessly, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry to desperately pleading. I'd blocked her number. Ryan hadn't, but he hadn't answered either. Until one Sunday morning, 6 weeks after the gala, when she showed up at our house. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the doorbell rang. Ryan was in the shower. I looked through the peephole and saw Patricia standing on our porch, perfectly dressed as always, holding a bakery box. I could have not answered, could have waited for her to leave, but I'd spent enough time hiding from confrontation. I opened the door. Natalie. Patricia's smile was careful, tentative. I'm so glad you're home. I brought those croissants you like from that bakery on Hawthorne. What do you want, Patricia? Her smile faltered. I want to talk to my son. He won't answer my calls. Can you blame him? I made mistakes. I know that. But he's my son, Natalie. I deserve a chance to explain. Explain what? How you spent years trying to destroy his marriage. How you manipulated him and Jessica and me. How you lied to everyone. I kept my voice level, but I didn't step aside to let her in. I was trying to protect him. You don't understand. I could see that you two weren't right for each other. I could see Ryan wasn't happy. Ryan was fine until you convinced him he wasn't. Patricia's expression hardened. You can't keep him from me forever. I'm his mother. I'm not keeping him from you. He's making his own choices. And right now, he's choosing not to talk to you. This is your fault. The mask slipped completely. You turned him against me, poisoned him with your accusations. I never would have had to. She stopped herself. Had to what? Manipulate him? Lie to him? Try to replace me with Jessica? Jessica was better for him. She understood him. She didn't try to change him or make him into something he's not. I never tried to change Ryan. I loved him exactly as he was. You're the one who couldn't accept that he'd chosen someone other than who you picked for him. We stared at each other across the threshold of my house. The house Patricia had once had a key to, the house she'd sent Jessica to with that key, the house that was supposed to be my home, but had become a battlefield. You're not good enough for him, Patricia said, and there was venom in her voice now. You'll never be what he needs. Maybe not, but at least I'll never be what you are. Someone so afraid of being alone that she'd rather destroy her son's happiness than let him build a life that doesn't revolve around her. Patricia's hand tightened on the bakery box. For a second, I thought she might throw it at me. Instead, she just turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the porch steps. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. Ryan appeared at the top of the stairs, his hair still wet from the shower. Was that my mom?
Yeah.
What did she want? To talk to you. I told her you weren't available. He came down the stairs and pulled me into a hug. Thank you. I hugged him back, and something in me relaxed slightly. This was what I needed to see. Ryan choosing us over her. Not dramatically, not with big speeches, but in this small, quiet moment of support. We went back to therapy. We kept going on dates. We started sleeping in the same bed again, though it took another 2 weeks before we actually had sex. And even then it was tentative, careful, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But we were rebuilding.
Slowly.
Painfully. one conversation at a time. Meanwhile, Patricia's world was unraveling in ways I hadn't anticipated. Jessica called me 2 months after the gala. We'd stayed in touch, not friends exactly, but allies who understood what we'd survived. You should know, Jessica said, Patricia's been reaching out to me, asking me to tell Ryan it was all a misunderstanding, that I manipulated her, not the other way around. Are you going to? Hell no. But I thought you should know she's trying to rewrite the narrative again.
She was.
I heard about it through the social network Patricia had so carefully cultivated. She was telling people I'd had a breakdown, that I'd accused her of things she'd never done, that Jessica and I had conspired against her out of jealousy. Some people believed her. Patricia had decades of social capital, years of being the generous patron and the devoted mother. A few of her closest friends rallied around her, accepted her version of events. But more people didn't. Because once you see the pattern of manipulation, once you understand how it works, you start seeing it everywhere. And Patricia had left a trail of smaller manipulations, smaller betrayals, throughout her social circle. Clients started requesting final bills and switching to other firms. Friends stopped inviting her to events. The charity board she'd chaired for 5 years asked her to step down. I didn't orchestrate any of it. I didn't have to. I just exposed the truth, and the truth had done the rest. 3 months after the gala, I ran into one of Patricia's former friends at the farmer's market. I owe you an apology, Margaret said. She was a woman in her 60s who'd been in Patricia's inner circle for years. I didn't believe it at first. What happened at the gala? But then I started thinking about some things she'd said to me over the years. About my daughter's marriage. About my son's career choices. Always subtle. Always framed as concern. But always undermining. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Don't be. You did me a favor. You showed me what I'd been too close to see. She paused. How are you and Ryan doing? We're working on it.
Good.
Don't give up on him. He's not his mother, even if he learned some bad habits from her. I thought about that conversation a lot over the next few weeks. About patterns and learned behaviors. About how much of who we are is inherited and how much is chosen. Ryan and I were 6 months into therapy when Dr. Winters asked us if we were ready to make a decision. You've done good work, she said. Both of you. You've been honest, you've set boundaries, you've rebuilt communication. But at some point, you need to decide if you're staying married or if you're separating as conscious partners. Ryan and I looked at each other across the familiar office. I want to stay married, he said. If you do. And I realized I did. Not because I'd forgotten the betrayal or because everything was fixed, but because we'd both changed. We'd both learned something about ourselves and each other that we couldn't have learned any other way. I want to stay married too, I said. Dr. Winters smiled. Then let's talk about what that looks like going forward. What it looked like was different than before. We set new boundaries. New expectations. We had standing weekly check-ins where we talked about anything that was bothering us, no matter how small. We committed to individual therapy as well as couples therapy. And we dealt with Patricia. 8 months after the gala, Ryan finally called his mother. I was there when he did it, sitting next to him on the couch, holding his hand. Mom, he said when she answered. I'm ready to talk. They met at a coffee shop, neutral ground. Ryan went alone. He was gone for 2 hours. When he came back, he looked exhausted but relieved. How did it go?
I asked. She apologized.
Sort of. She said she'd only wanted what was best for me, but she could see now that she'd gone about it the wrong way. He sat down next to me. I told her that wasn't enough, that the wrong way was a massive understatement for years of manipulation, that if she wanted to be part of my life going forward, things had to change fundamentally. What did she say? She agreed. But Nat, I don't know if she really gets it. I think she thinks if she just apologizes and we wait long enough, everything will go back to the way it was. It won't. I know.
And I told her that.
I told her we'd see her once a month at most. No more Sunday dinners. No more constant calls. And she has to respect our boundaries or we're done completely. How did she take it? She cried. But she agreed. I studied his face. Are you okay? Honestly? I don't know. She's my mom. I love her. But I also see her clearly now, and I can't unsee it. It's like grieving someone who's still alive. I understood that. I was still grieving too. Not for Patricia, but for the naive version of myself who'd believed family was always safe, that mothers-in-law always wanted what was best for their children's marriages, that love was enough protection against manipulation. But I'd become someone different through all of this. Someone harder, but also more honest. Someone who knew her own worth and wouldn't compromise it for anyone's comfort. Patricia came to our house exactly once in the following 6 months. It was awkward and tense. She brought a carefully chosen hostess gift. She complimented the changes we'd made to the living room. She asked about our work and listened to the answers without offering advice or criticism. It was the performance of a reformed manipulator, and I didn't trust it for a second. But Ryan needed to try. Needed to see if his mother could change, could be someone safe to have in our lives. I didn't think she could. But I also knew that wasn't my call to make. A year after the gala, Ryan and I went back to the Portland Art Museum. Not for an event this time, just for ourselves. We wandered through the galleries hand in hand, talking about art and life and everything we'd survived. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't found those letters? Ryan asked as we stood in front of a painting of a storm-tossed ocean. All the time. What do you think would have happened? I considered the question. I think we would have gotten divorced. You would have ended up with Jessica or someone else your mother approved of. And you would have been just as unhappy because the problem was never me. It was your inability to set boundaries with her. And you. I would have been devastated. But I also think I would have eventually been okay. I'm stronger than I knew. Ryan turned to look at me. You are. You're the strongest person I know. I learned it from fighting your mother. He laughed, but it was a sad sound. I'm sorry I put you in a position where you had to. I know. We stood there quietly, and I thought about victory.
About what it meant to win.
Patricia had lost her son's unconditional trust, lost her social standing, lost the ability to control the narrative of her own life. Those were real consequences, and they'd come from her own actions being exposed. But I'd won something more valuable. I'd won clarity, self-knowledge, the understanding that I could survive betrayal and manipulation and still come out whole on the other side. My marriage had survived too, but it was different now. Built on honesty instead of naivety, on conscious choice instead of romantic assumption, on boundaries that were clearly defined and actively maintained. Ryan and I weren't the same people who'd gotten married 5 years ago in that rose garden his mother had chosen. We were more complicated, more damaged, but also more real. I love you, Ryan said, still looking at the painting. I love you too. And I did. But I also loved myself now in a way I hadn't before. Loved my own strength, my own resilience, my own ability to see clearly even when the truth was painful. Patricia had tried to destroy me. Instead, she'd forced me to become someone she could never touch again. That was my real victory. Not revenge or public humiliation or legal consequences, but the quiet, permanent transformation of becoming someone who couldn't be manipulated anymore. Someone who knew her own worth. Someone who would never again let anyone, not a mother-in-law, not a husband, not anyone, make her doubt her own reality. We left the museum as the sun was setting, painting the Portland sky in shades of orange and pink. Ryan's arm was around my shoulders. My hand was in his pocket, our fingers intertwined. We were going home, to the house we'd fought for, to the life we'd chosen to rebuild. It wasn't perfect. It probably never would be, but it was ours. Honestly, completely, unmistakably ours. And that was enough. 3 years later, I got a call from an unknown number. Natalie? It's Jessica. We hadn't spoken in over a year, though we'd exchanged occasional texts. She'd moved to Seattle, started working at a different practice, was dating someone new. Hey, how are you? I'm good. Really good, actually.
But I wanted to tell you something.
Patricia died. Heart attack, apparently. Ryan probably already knows, but I wanted you to hear it from me too. I sat down slowly. When? 2 days ago. The funeral is this weekend. After we hung up, I just sat there for a long time. Ryan was at work. The house was quiet. Patricia was dead. I felt nothing. Not relief, not satisfaction, not grief. Just a kind of hollow acknowledgement that a chapter had finally, definitively closed. When Ryan came home that evening, he already knew. His face was red and blotchy, like he'd been crying. "I'm sorry," I said, pulling him into a hug. "She was my mom," he said into my shoulder. "Even after everything, she was still my mom." "I know." We went to the funeral together. It was small, just a few dozen people, far fewer than would have attended 3 years ago. Patricia's social circle had contracted significantly in her final years. I didn't cry. Ryan did, and I held his hand through it all. At the reception afterward, one of Patricia's remaining friends approached me. "She talked about you, you know, toward the end." "Oh," she said she'd made mistakes. That she'd been so afraid of losing Ryan that she'd almost lost him anyway. "She said you were stronger than she'd given you credit for."
I didn't know what to say to that.
It might have been true, or it might have been another manipulation. One last attempt to rewrite her narrative. It didn't matter anymore. Patricia was gone. The damage she'd done was permanent, but so was the strength I'd found in surviving it. Ryan and I drove home in silence. We'd been married for 8 years now. We'd weathered his mother's manipulation, rebuilt our relationship from the ground up, learned to trust each other again. We weren't perfect. We still had hard days. We still went to therapy sometimes when we felt ourselves slipping into old patterns. But we were real,
Honest.
committed to choosing each other every single day, not out of obligation or manipulation, but out of genuine love and partnership. That night, lying in bed next to my husband, I thought about Patricia's friend's words. Stronger than she'd given you credit for.
Yeah.
I was. And I'd earned every bit of that strength. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. I hope it helps someone out there who's dealing with their own Patricia, their own manipulator who hides behind love and concern while slowly poisoning everything they touch. You're stronger than you think. You can survive this. You can become someone they can't touch. It won't be easy. It won't be fast. And it won't always feel like winning. But on the other side of that survival, you'll find something worth having. Yourself. Clear-eyed, honest, unmanipulatable. And that, more than any revenge or public vindication, is the victory that matters.
Trust me.
I know. And if you found this story helpful or resonant, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, what resonated with you, or if you've dealt with something similar. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you're stronger than anyone who tries to make you small. Never forget that.